Right now, above your head, a thin shell of gas is the only reason you are alive. It stretches just 100 kilometers into the void of space, an almost invisible membrane wrapped around a planet 12,700 kilometers wide. Proportionally, it is thinner than the wet skin of an apple. And yet, it is the reason every ocean on this planet exists. It is the reason you can hear the voice of another human being. It is the reason the blood inside your veins does not boil. We have never lived without it. We have never had to think about what losing it would mean. Tonight, we will. What if Earth's atmosphere disappeared, not forever, but for exactly 30 days? 30 days of absolute silence. 30 days of unimaginable fire and ice. 30 days where the most ordinary thing in the world, the air above your head, simply ceases to exist. Science has the answer. And it is more extraordinary and more terrifying than you could possibly imagine. To understand what we lose, we must first understand what the atmosphere truly is. Most people think of it as air, a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen that fills our lungs. But the atmosphere is not simply air. It is a planetary fortress. A multi-layered shield stretching thousands of kilometers above the surface of the Earth. Its lowest layer, the troposphere, extends just 12 kilometers upward from the ground beneath your feet. And yet, this is where everything we call weather exists. Every cloud, every rainstorm, every hurricane, every gentle breeze, all confined to this impossibly thin band of gas. Above the troposphere lies the stratosphere. And within it, the ozone layer. A region so rich in ozone molecules that it absorbs 97 to 99% of the sun's most dangerous ultraviolet radiation. Without the ozone layer, the surface of the Earth would be biologically sterilized within decades. Higher still, the mesosphere and thermosphere burn up the 100 tons of meteoric material that rain toward Earth every single day. Without the atmosphere, every piece of space debris that now vaporizes harmlessly overhead strikes the surface intact. But the atmosphere does something even more fundamental than filtering radiation. It maintains pressure. At sea level, the atmosphere presses against every square centimeter of your body with 14.7 pounds of force per square inch. This pressure is the only reason your blood remains liquid. It is the only reason you do not boil from the inside out. Remove it, and the human body begins to fail within seconds. The atmosphere also regulates temperature. Without it, Earth's average surface temperature does not remain at a comfortable 15 degrees Celsius. It plunges to -18 degrees Celsius. The oceans freeze. The planet dies. And now, in this scenario, the atmosphere is gone. All of it. In a single, impossible instant. The moment the atmosphere disappears, the first thing the world loses is not air. It is sound. Sound is a pressure wave, vibrations moving through a physical medium. Without the atmosphere, there is no medium. There is nothing for vibrations to travel through. In a single instant, every sound on Earth stops simultaneously. Every engine. Every voice. Every crashing ocean wave. Every heartbeat that has ever been heard by human ears. Gone. The silence that follows is not the silence of a quiet room. It is the silence of absolute vacuum. The silence of the void of space, descended, without warning, to the surface of the Earth. And in those first silent seconds, the human body begins its own catastrophe. Without atmospheric pressure to contain it, the moisture on exposed skin, the eyes, the lips, the surface of the mouth, begins to vaporize. The nitrogen dissolved in the bloodstream immediately begins forming gas bubbles, a process similar to decompression sickness, but instantaneous and total. Within 15 seconds, the brain begins to lose consciousness from oxygen deprivation. Within 90 seconds, for any human being standing in open air, biological survival is no longer possible. In less than 2 minutes, the most technologically advanced species this planet has ever produced, the species that built satellites, split the atom, and mapped the human genome, is rendered inert by the absence of the one thing it never thought to protect. But the planet itself has barely registered what has happened. The Earth's own reckoning is still to come. Within the first 10 minutes, the oceans begin a transformation that has no parallel in the geological record. Atmospheric pressure is what keeps water liquid at the surface. Remove it, and the surface layers of every ocean on Earth begin to flash evaporate. Not boiling from heat. Explosive vaporization from the sudden and total collapse of atmospheric pressure. Billions of tons of water vapor erupt upward from every ocean surface on the planet simultaneously, a roiling, violent wall of fog launching itself into the vacuum above. At the same time, the temperature difference between the sunlit side and the dark side of the Earth begins to accelerate beyond anything the planet's climate systems have ever experienced. On the day side of the planet, with no atmosphere to scatter or filter incoming solar radiation, surface temperatures begin climbing rapidly toward 120 degrees Celsius. On the night side, with no insulating blanket of air to retain radiated heat, temperatures plummet toward -180 degrees Celsius. Within the first hour, this extreme temperature differential begins driving shockwaves of thermal energy across continental boundaries. A ghost storm of heat and cold with no atmosphere to propagate through, expressed instead through the fracturing of solid rock. By hour 2, the tectonic consequences begin. The atmosphere is not weightless. It exerts measurable, constant pressure across every square kilometer of the Earth's crust, a stabilizing force that has been present since the planet cooled from its molten birth. Remove that weight suddenly, and the crust responds. Fault lines that have been locked in tectonic tension for centuries release simultaneously. Earthquakes begin, not isolated tremors, but dozens of major seismic events at once, across every major fault system on the planet. The Pacific Ring of Fire activates in its entirety. Supervolcanoes that have slept undisturbed for thousands of years begin to vent. Yellowstone, in Wyoming. Campi Flegrei, beneath the Gulf of Naples in Italy. The Toba caldera in Sumatra, the site of an eruption 74,000 years ago that nearly drove the human species to extinction. All of them, awakening simultaneously. By hour 6, every major active volcanic system on the planet is in eruption. By hour 12, the full electromagnetic spectrum of solar radiation reaches the Earth's surface completely unimpeded. Hard X-ray radiation. Ultraviolet C, the most biologically destructive band of ultraviolet light, previously absorbed entirely by the ozone layer. Gamma radiation. Radiation levels on the surface climb to hundreds of times above lethal biological thresholds, the equivalent of standing in the direct field of an unshielded nuclear reactor. Every unprotected biological organism above ground, every insect, every bird, every surviving plant, begins experiencing rapid cellular breakdown. DNA strands unravel. Proteins denature. Tissues fail at the molecular level. By the end of the first 24 hours, the surface of the Earth is, by every biological measure, sterile. Day 2 brings a new and deeper catastrophe, not from above, but from within the ocean systems that have regulated life on Earth for hundreds of millions of years. Atmospheric pressure is what sustains the deep ocean circulation systems that distribute heat across the planet. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the great conveyor belt of warm surface water and cold deep water that moderates the climate of Europe and North America, stalls completely within hours. The global thermohaline circulation, the planetary climate engine, shuts down. The transfer of thermal energy between the equator and the poles, which has maintained Earth's temperature balance since the age of the earliest oceans, ceases entirely. By day 4, photosynthesis has stopped across the entire surface of the planet. Every plant, every tree, every photosynthetic organism that depends on surface conditions is dead or irreversibly dying. The base of the food chain, the foundation on which every complex organism on Earth depends, has collapsed. By day 5, tidal forces from the Moon, no longer dampened by the mass of the world ocean, begin acting directly on the Earth's solid crust. Lunar gravity, which previously expressed itself through the gentle, predictable rise and fall of ocean tides, now pulls on exposed continental rock. The result is tidal flexing of tectonic plates, triggering magnitude 9 earthquakes with mechanical regularity every 72 hours. By day 7, any scientist observing Earth from orbit would make a single, devastating assessment. The surface of the Earth is now indistinguishable from the surface of Mars. Barren, irradiated, silent, and completely hostile to the existence of life. But deep below the surface, in the crushing, lightless darkness of the Hadal zones, something is still alive. In the deepest trenches of the ocean floor, the Mariana Trench, the Puerto Rico Trench, the Java Trench, organisms have existed for millions of years without any connection to the surface world. Chemosynthetic bacteria. Tube worms extending meters in length from their anchors on the seafloor. Hadal amphipods, small crustaceans adapted to pressures that would instantaneously destroy any surface organism. These creatures do not photosynthesize. They derive their energy entirely from the chemical reactions of hydrothermal vents, fissures in the ocean floor that release heat and mineral-rich superheated water from the planet's interior. They have no evolutionary relationship with the sky above them. They do not know the atmosphere is gone. And in these ancient, pressurized ecosystems, kilometers below the dying surface, the last biological holdouts of planet Earth continue their existence, unknown to each other, unknown to us, the silent inheritors of a world that was, until 30 days ago, alive. By week 3, the surface water is gone. Evaporated into space. Frozen into permanent ice fields receiving no solar warmth. Or locked within deep underground aquifers sealed beneath kilometers of fractured and irradiated rock. The planet's surface has settled into two permanent, opposing states. Scorched, cratered, irradiated desert on the day side. Absolute glaciation on the night side. Earth, observed from deep space, has changed color. The blue of the oceans, gone. The white of the clouds, gone. The green of the continents, gone. What remains is brown, and gray, and scarred. The color of a world that has forgotten it was once alive. On the 30th day, the scenario ends. The atmosphere returns. And here is what the science tells us would follow. Reconstruction would require millennia. The ozone layer alone, if regeneration was somehow possible, would require decades of uninterrupted atmospheric chemistry before it could meaningfully filter ultraviolet radiation again. The ocean circulation systems would require centuries to restabilize. The average surface temperature, disrupted at its most fundamental level, would oscillate in violent climate cycles for thousands of years. Life returning to the surface, if it came, would face a world reborn, but not restored. A world that had become, for 30 days, something it was never designed to be. But before we close this chapter, there is one more piece of this story that demands to be told. One detail that the science has confirmed. One parallel that should permanently alter how you see the sky above you. 4 billion years ago, Mars had an atmosphere. Not the thin trace of carbon dioxide that barely clings to it today. A real atmosphere. With atmospheric pressure capable of sustaining liquid water on the surface. With oxygen. With weather. With rivers and lakes and the slow, patient chemistry of a world preparing itself for life. We know this because we have found the evidence preserved in Martian rock. Ancient riverbeds, carved by flowing water billions of years ago. Fossilized shorelines. The dried and cracked beds of lakes that once reflected a sky that no longer exists. Something took Mars's atmosphere. Not in a day. Not in a month. Over millions of years, the sun's solar wind, a constant torrent of charged particles radiating outward from the solar corona at 800 kilometers per second, gradually and relentlessly stripped the Martian atmospheric envelope away. Particle by particle. Year by year. Until nothing remained but the cold, thin ghost of the sky that once was. The reason this happened to Mars, and not to Earth, is our magnetic field. A planetary shield, generated by the movement of molten iron deep within the Earth's outer core, deflecting the solar wind and preserving our atmospheric envelope from erosion. Without it, the story of Mars becomes the story of Earth. And here is what the planetary data is telling us right now. Earth's magnetic field has weakened by 9% in the last 150 years. A region known as the South Atlantic anomaly, an expanding zone where the magnetic field is measurably weaker than normal, is growing larger. Satellites passing through this region routinely experience elevated radiation damage to their instruments. Some researchers believe this anomaly may be an early indicator of a geomagnetic excursion, a large-scale migration of the magnetic poles. We are not on the edge of atmospheric loss. We are not approaching a civilizational crisis this century, or the next. But the mechanism that stripped Mars bare, that same relentless solar wind pressing against the Earth's magnetic shield right now, at this very moment, is measurably, provably, continuing its work. Earth is on the same road that Mars once traveled. Mars simply ran out of road. The atmosphere above you right now is not a guarantee. It is not permanent. It is the accumulated product of 4.5 billion years of extraordinary planetary coincidence, a magnetic field powerful enough to deflect a star's solar wind, an orbital distance precise enough to keep water liquid, an iron core still hot enough to sustain the shield that protects everything that has ever lived on this world. Remove any one of those variables, and you arrive here. At silence. At the brown and the grey and the scarred world we walked through today. We live inside a miracle so constant, so invisible, so utterly unremarkable in its familiarity, that we have forgotten to wonder at it. We breathe without thinking. We look up at a blue sky without asking why it is blue. We feel the wind move against our skin without understanding what it cost the universe to place it there. The next time you step outside, pause. Feel the air pressing back against you. Hear the sound of the living world carrying through it. Watch the sky scatter sunlight into that impossible, ancient shade of blue. And remember what you now know. That invisible breath of air between you and the void of space is the most extraordinary planetary structure in the known solar system. And it is thinner, proportionally, than the skin of an apple.